It's time for another economic lesson. Here's where we are. Here's where we could be going and what you need to be doing. Okay? That's what we're going to pay off. Here's where we are. How many of you remember a term in middle school called stagflation? Any of you guys in the booth? Honestly, be honest. No, they're not even paying attention to the show. Stagflation is a little-known term. You learned about it in middle school. It was in the book, but we don't talk about it a lot. But let me just tell you, it's a bad thing. Right now, the U.S. economy has been this weird Frankenstein type economy. What do I mean by that? Well, we've seen negatives like high inflation, but we've seen positives such as low unemployment rate. 3.5% is the latest number. Been hovering in that 3.5, 3.4%, which is historically low. So it's kind of weird. We've also seen wages increase, but of course your cost of goods through inflation rise. So it's just been this weird combination. So our feckless Fed chair, Jerome Powell, who helped create all the inflationary environments, if you will, the winds of inflation coming out of the pandemic, has now tried to get in with the Fed and manually force a decrease in inflation. How has he done it? 9 interest rate hikes. We're expecting another quarter-point interest rate hike next week. That'll be 10 interest rate hikes. Okay? That is now having an effect on the economy that interest rate hikes historically do. What does that look like? We are now seeing the gross domestic product slowing to 1.1%. I reported on the show yesterday in the third quarter of 2022, and the gross domestic product was about 4.6. And then as we look at the fourth quarter of 2022, it dropped down to 3.4. And so the first quarter of 2023, now we're at 1.1%. That's below the expectations. For Wall Street, they thought it would slow to 1.9. So this is negative. We're seeing the gross domestic product, the value of goods and services, they're dropping. Now, the Federal Reserve's inflation gauge that they pay the most attention to is the personal consumption expenditure. Now, you see it in the news as PCE index. That increased to 4.2%, higher than the expected 3.7%. So what does that mean? It means that the buying habits of we the people are still very robust, and it is driving inflation up. It is driving wages and salaries up. So now this is leaning towards stagflation. What is stagflation? This is the Ken version. I'd be the coolest government teacher you ever had, I promise. Keep it simple. Stagflation is when we see an increase in inflation, and we have seen that over the last year and a half, and we've seen it in the latest numbers for the first quarter. Inflation is now increasing, but we see a decrease in growth. The GDP is shrinking. Now, we are not in stagflation because there's one other factor that has to be true, and that's for unemployment to rise. So we aren't there yet. We're in this pre-stagflation situation. But Jerome Powell has been on record as saying that a rise in unemployment is a necessary evil, and it will be a result of rising interest rates. And by the way, he's historically correct. So we're not in stagflation, but quick review, stagflation sucks. Because here's what happens. Inflation is up, so the cost of living is higher. The economy slows down. And as a result of the economy slowing down, profits drop, companies lay people off, and unemployment rises. That's stagflation. We're close. Many people are predicting that we're going to be there in the third quarter this year, third or fourth quarter. The latest comment on unemployment, which concerns me, is that there is a lagging report date, essentially, on what we get every month. So when we say, okay, the January unemployment numbers, the April unemployment numbers, that's a lagging measure. It takes a while to gather that. So the unemployment rate, even though I can say today it's 3.5%, it's actually not today. We just don't know what it is because it's about a month, 6-8 weeks behind, something like that. Okay? So all that to say, the unemployment rate will go up if we see ourselves go into a recession. And I don't want to be a doomsday person, but I got to tell you, it's going to happen. We've seen big tech laying people off because of a potential recession, and they started doing that in the third and fourth quarter of last year. Now here we are at the end of the first quarter of 2023, and I'm telling you, companies get scared. You see more reports like this. This is a Yahoo article. You see more reports of a looming recession and things like stagflation, and companies will lay people off. They are going to tighten the belt just like you would tighten the belt. So why am I telling you this? I unfortunately think that our Fed chair, who does not represent, in my opinion, a wise monetary chief, he doesn't represent it to me. Because here's the deal. I would rather deal with inflation than I would stagflation. See, I can adjust my budget, but I would rather have my job and adjust my budget than not have my job and still deal with higher cost. But I'm telling you, I think you're going to see a lot of layoffs if these numbers continue. That's if. If the GDP continues to shrink and inflation stays stubbornly high, folks, some of you are going to get laid off. So I'm warning you, be ready. Be ready financially. Be ready professionally. Do you have a diversified income? Do you have 3 or 4 people that you know you could call and you have a good shot at moving into different industries? I'm telling you to be aware. This should not sneak up on you. We've got the financial resources at Ramsey Solution. I've got the professional resources. We can help you weather the storm. But if this continues, there will be a higher unemployment rate, and it will infect some of you. But you can be okay.